You'll need to start by unscrewing your factory shift knob. The factory may have applied Loctite to the knob, so you may need to heat the knob up with a heat gun or blow dryer and then use a strap wrench to remove it. Starting in the back and working forward, pull up on your center trim to remove it from the console. With the console free, you will then need to undo any wiring connections so you can move the console trim out of your way. Next, we will need to remove the sound material by taking off the two rear clips and pulling the material free of the shifter. Next, we will need to remove the factory handle by using a 13mm socket. You will need to fully remove the top bolt first and then the bottom bolt. Next, we will need to use a 10mm deep well socket and an extension so we can move the two rear nuts and the top two bolts of the dust plate. Next, we will need to remove the dust plate from the car. Next, we will need to begin the work underneath the car. We will start by lowering the transmission brace about 1/2 inch. You will need an 18mm wrench for this. I like to fully remove two bolts and then put them back in about 2 turns for a gauge. When lowering the brace, go back and forth between the bolts so that it comes down evenly. The only reason for lowering the brace is to provide more working room for your hands. This brace can be fully removed for more room if needed. Next, we will need to remove the linkage pin. You will need a 6mm Allen wrench on the driver's side and a 17mm socket on the passenger side to remove the nut. With the nut removed, we can then slide the linkage out and drop the linkage arm off of the shifter. Next, we will need a 13mm socket to remove the bolt for the reverse lockout solenoid. With the bolt removed, we then need to pull out the solenoid and set it out of the way. So you get the Allen wrench in the hole. I don't know if you can see it there, but it's in a hole. And now I have to push it to pop that clip free. So once you pop the clip, it's going to pop up a little bit right in here. Guess I got to go a little bit more. Alright, so it's up, and now the clip's got to rotate up, and then you're going to pull the pin more to the passenger side. And it should just come right on out. So this was up in there like that. And what we had to do was we had to take the Allen wrench, and there's a little hole right in the transmission, and you want to stick this part of the Allen wrench right in a hole, and there's a tab on this side, and you're trying to push that tab so it pops free of the transmission. And once you do that, use your Allen wrench or screwdriver to help pry that up, and you're going to rotate it up and take it out. Alright, The hole I'm referring to when you have your clip on there is this guy right in here. It's kind of dark, but you have a hole right in here. That's where your Allen wrench needs to go into. Right in there to pop that clip out. Alright, so now on the driver's side you have this clip here on this side. Once again, you want to take your Allen wrench. You want to put it in that hole right below the rear of the clip. And just give it a good push really hard, and that'll pop the clip up. Then you want to take your Allen wrench, get behind the clip, and then kind of just pry it up. So on this side, on the driver's side here, your clip goes in this way. And once again, your Allen wrench, there's a little hole in here you're trying to push, and there's this tab here. You're trying to push this tab back so it pops off the transmission. It goes just right in under here. There's a hole, and you push. This will pop up just a little bit, so you can get your Allen wrench on this side and use that as leverage to go ahead and pull that up. So once you get it free, it'll rotate up and come on out. We now need to remove the rear support bracket. We need to use a 10mm deep well socket and a 12-inch extension. When you remove the nuts, you will notice the bracket is held up with a retaining clip. To remove this clip, you need to compress the clip as you pull the bracket down. Next, you will need to slide the bracket off of the shifter. We now need to remove the shifter from the car. We will start by moving the shifter so that both of the legs are hanging over the passenger side of the drive shaft. From back inside the car, we can now finesse the shifter through the floor pan opening and remove it from the car. Next, we can begin the installation of the Barton shifter. We will start by installing the bracket. We will be using a 10mm deep well socket, and we'll be reusing the 2 nuts we previously removed. When installing the bracket, make sure the 5 screws in the Barton logo are facing the rear of the vehicle. At this time, we do not want to tighten the nuts. We want to leave the bracket loose. Next, we need to install the Barton shifter arms. The arms are symmetrical, so it does not matter which arm you put on what side. Applying some soapy water to the bushings may make it easier to align the holes for the locking clip. Make sure the pin is fully through the arm and that the clip is fully pushed down. We will now need to repeat this process on the passenger side. With both arms installed, we can now reinstall the reverse lockout solenoid using a 13mm socket and the bolt that we previously removed. From back inside the car, we can now put the Barton shifter through the floor pan opening, making sure that the two smaller ears are facing the rear of the vehicle. At this time, we now need to tighten the transmission brace. It is important that this brace is raised prior to connecting any shifter components. With the brace tightened back up, we will need to slide the shifter body back into the rear bracket and connect the front arms to the main shifter body. Apply some blue Loctite to the bolts and start them by hand, but do not fully tighten the bolts yet. Next, we need to connect the linkage to the shifter using the shoulder bolt that we previously removed. The bolt needs to start on the driver's side and slide through to the passenger side. Apply some blue medium strength Loctite to the nut and fully tighten at this time. Using a 1/2-inch socket, we can now come back and fully tighten the front support arms. With the linkage tight and the two front arms tight, we now need to come back to the rear bracket and fully tighten those nuts, being careful not to over tighten them. At this point, all the work underneath the car is complete. We will now need to reinstall the dust boot using the hardware that we previously removed. Make sure the opening in the bottom of the dust boot fully seats around the top cap of the shifter. Now we can put the sound insulation back in and install the top adapter. Using the supplied 5/16 cap screw and a 1/4-inch Allen wrench, apply some blue medium strength Loctite and fully tighten. The arm is timed so it can only go in one direction. Reinstall the sound insulation clips, the wiring connectors, and the center trim, working your way from the front to the back. Once the trim is reinstalled, we can now thread down the shift knob. Turn the knob until it's tight. If you cannot get the shift pattern to line up, apply some blue Loctite to the thread and orientate the pattern so that it is correct, and then let it dry. This now concludes the installation. Unthread the shift knob and remove the shift boot by pulling up on the corners. Now we need to open the center console and use a Phillips screwdriver to remove the two upper screws. To remove the top center trim, we need to pull up on the rear corners and undo any wiring connectors you may have. And then we need to set the trim to the side. Using a 13mm socket, we need to remove the shifter handle. Fully remove the top bolt first and then the bottom bolt. Unclip any wiring connectors that are attached to the console. Using a 7mm socket, remove the two front screws, and then simply pull out the two side trim pieces. In the rear of the console, remove the felt bottom, and using a 10mm deep well socket, remove the two bottom nuts. At this point, you can remove the center console and continue on with the rest of the install.